Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how I made this set of 2 cards. I made them at the same time, so this video will show some tips on how to make multiple cards at once. And these feature some really pretty lawn fawn dies and a couple stamps, mainly these flower and leaf dies. So without further ado, let's get into the card making. I've gone ahead and die cut a number of flowers and leaves using 2 different lawn fawn die sets. I believe they're called Happy Hibiscus for the flowers and Tropical Leaves for the leaves, but check down in the description below the video just to make sure I'm getting those names right. I list all of my supplies down there, so in case you're interested in what I used, you can check that. So there's 2 different sizes of flowers, a large and a small, and I cut them each out of 3 different colors. So I've got 3 in the light pink, light blue, and light peach, and 3 small ones in those same colors. I also cut out the little centers of the flowers all in white, and then those sort of stemmy pieces in yellow. I don't know what those are called. My apologies. If you know, please leave a comment. I'd love to learn. I probably should have Googled that before the video. So for each of these flowers, I'm just adding some ink to the outside edges using 1 color of Distress Oxide. So for these light pink flowers, I'm using some worn lipstick Distress Oxide and just sort of blending in from the edges using a blending brush. This is a really good way to get sort of a 2-toned ink blended look only using 1 ink color, and it's super easy. So you get sort of these really stunning effects that look like they were a lot more work, but they're not very much work at all. So I'm going ahead and doing that with all of the flowers. For the blue flowers, I'm using Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide ink, and again just pulling in some ink onto the outer edges of the petals using a small blending brush. And then by leaving the center the color of the original cardstock, you get this beautiful 2-toned look, only having to use 1 color, super fast and easy. So again, I'm just leaving the center blank, and then you get that color from the cardstock coming through. For the peach flowers, I'm using Wild Honey Distress Oxide ink, again just pulling in the color onto the outer edges of the petal using my small ink blending brush. Then you get that beautiful 2-toned look. Doing the same thing for all the leaves, so I have Bundled Sage Distress Oxide ink, again just pulling in some ink onto the outer edges using a small blending brush. I'm going to do the same thing with the small inner parts of the flowers as well. I'm going to use some Tea Dye Distress Oxide ink to pull in some color onto the edges of those white flowers. While I do that, I did just want to mention that this video is part of a hashtag hop hosted by my crafty friend Biddy Penny. I'm going to link her channel down in the description box below as well so you can check it out. The hashtag is all about using old and new supplies, or techniques or anything, and each month has a different sort of theme. One of the themes that you could choose from for May was Floral Fantasy, so that's why I went with these beautiful floral dyes. And I really like the idea of using old and new products or techniques. So for me, these floral dyes and leaf dyes are an older product. They're from last summer, from 2021. But I'm using this technique that's a little bit new to me. I've not really tried this technique of blending in 1 color onto colored cardstock to get this 2-tone look, at least in a long time that I can remember. So this was a fun technique for me to try new, as well as using old techniques. And it's really fun to kind of combine old and new products so you get more use out of your old products, because otherwise they sometimes just sit in your craft room and you forget about them, right? So it's really nice to encourage you to go back and use those old products from time to time. So again, check out Biddy Penny's channel and she'll have more info about the hashtag hop over there. So I'm going ahead and gluing all these flowers together, and I just use a small dab of liquid glue in between each layer. I'm not worrying about gluing down the whole thing because I kind of like the look of some of the petals almost bending up. I feel like it makes the flower look a little bit more realistic. So again, I just went through all the flowers, the pink, the blue, and the orange. I just use a small dab of liquid glue in the center to glue them together. Now I can work on the backgrounds of the cards. So for this, I use this background die by Lawn Fawn that cuts panels the size of an A2 card, so that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, into diagonal stripes that are equally spaced. And it has that really nice stitching detail around the whole edge. I cut it once out of white cardstock and then once out of craft cardstock, and then alternated them so you can get 2 panels total, each with alternating colors. They were looking a little bit too flat to me though, so I wanted them to match the flowers a little bit more with that ink blended look. So I'm bringing in some Tea Dye Distress Oxide ink and just blending with a small blending brush along the edges of all of those stripes. And I'm going to do this on every stripe for both panels. This kind of gives it an interesting, almost like antique-y look, where the edges are just a little bit distressed and just look a little bit vintage, which I really like. And again, it kind of fits in with the look of the flowers because it's the same technique where we pull in ink from the edges. If I'm finding that I have too much ink on my brush and it's really standing out a little bit too much on the white panels, then I just skip over to the craft panels because the ink doesn't show up quite as clearly on those. And then I use up a bunch of the ink on those, and then I can come back to my white panels when the brush has a little bit less ink on it, and then it becomes a little bit more subtle on those panels. So as I work my way down the stripes here, I also just wanted to give you a little life update. You might have seen it on Instagram if you follow me there, which, by the way, the link is down in the description below if you want to check that out. I did announce over there that I am pregnant, so that's probably why you've been noticing that I've been posting a little bit less lately if you follow my channel closely. I will say that it's been a bit of a rough go with lots of different symptoms like exhaustion and nausea, and a lot of that just sort of sapped away my crafty mojo. And I think that can happen for a lot of different reasons, not necessarily just because you're pregnant. You know, I think we all go through times in life that are more difficult for whatever reason, and sometimes it just sort of saps away your energy for crafting, and that's what happened to me. I was finding when I was dealing with those symptoms, I just didn't have any time or desire to be in my craft room, which is really different than normal for me. So it was a rough time, both physically and mentally, because I love crafting, as I'm sure all of you watching do. And it was hard to kind of know that like my body just wasn't really allowing me to enjoy this hobby that I love so much. So, you know, if that ever happens to you, I can definitely sympathize. But luckily for me, it seems like the worst of the physical symptoms have passed. So I'm sort of getting my energy back, and my crafty mojo has come back a little bit with it as well. So I'm able to sort of be in my craft room again, have creative ideas flowing, and just enjoy the process. So thank you so much for your patience in waiting for me to post videos during this time. You know, it might be a little bit touch and go from now on, as I can't guarantee, you know, how much energy I'm going to have to make videos. For me, this is very much a hobby. I have a full-time job as well. So I love doing this, and I, of course, love to do it as much as possible, but sometimes it does have to take the back seat. So again, thank you so much for your patience. I will always continue to be here on YouTube sharing my crafty videos. The frequency may differ as much as I always try to aim for it to be once a week. We'll see how that goes in the future, but that is always my goal, so I will always try to work back to that. So, okay, back to the card making. As you can see, I splattered both of the panels with some gold watercolor, which I thought just gave it a really nice shimmer. And I did that for both panels, and then I just glued them strip by strip onto an A2 size card base. So that's how you get those diagonal stripes lined up on your card. I just used some liquid glue for that, and again, just sort of went one by one, starting in the bottom left corner and working my way up. Now it's time to just put the rest of the cards together, and I'm just going to show you the process for one, and I'm going to do the second one off camera, but they're really the same techniques. I cut a scallop circle out of some Spiffy Speckles cardstock by Fawn. This is just a white cardstock that has those really pretty yellow splatters on it, just for a little bit of extra detail. And then what I did, and this is a really good tip for anyone who wants to make a card like this where you're sort of assembling lots of different pieces like leaves and flowers into clusters that you want to be in a very particular place on your card. What I did is I set it all up first, but didn't glue anything down. So I put all of the flowers where I wanted them, tucked all of the leaves where I wanted them, and then what I did is I just moved all those pieces off to the side of the card in the same positions they had been in. So I moved that orange flower with a couple leaves off to the left, kept keeping them in the same positions, and then I moved those blue and pink flowers off to the right, as well as the leaves in that cluster, again just sort of keeping them in the same general positions that I wanted them to be on the card. That way I can then go one by one and just bring each piece back and glue it down onto the card, starting on the bottom layer, so starting by gluing down the leaves that are meant to be in the background, and then sort of moving up to the flowers that are meant to be in the foreground. For the flowers, I also used some foam squares just to give them a little bit of dimension. So this is just a good way to sort of have those floral assemblies on your card come together pretty easily by just sort of pre-assembling them without adhering anything, pulling them off the card in the same sort of locations and positions you want them to be, and then just pulling them back piece by piece and adhering them down. I also went ahead and die cut this big sentiment. It says thank you. It's another die cut by Fawn. I cut it out of some black cardstock just so it's really nice and striking and sticks out on the card. And because I wanted this to also be elevated, I'm just cutting down some foam squares to be very thin little strips to stick behind those letters into the empty spaces on the card. And then adding some glue where I know they'll overlap with the flowers. Then I can stick them all together. And those are the final cards. You can see here the other card came together very similarly. I just used a different word die cut. This one says aloha, and I added a couple little stamped toucans, which I thought were really cute. But otherwise, everything about it was the same. For a final touch, I'm just going through and adding some sequins. I placed them where I liked them, and then I can just pick each one up with my tweezers, add a little small dab of liquid glue, and then stick the sequin down. I did this for both panels, and you can see my cat Luna decided to visit at this part. She's just walking around sort of on the sides of the camera view here. So that's basically it. Those are the final cards. Again, it was really easy to sort of mass produce these by just die cutting all of the pieces at once and assembling them piece by piece. I really like sort of that shimmer that you get from the gold splatter in the background, as well as the shine from those sequins. And I love how easy this ink blending technique was for the flowers. You get this really beautiful two-tone look, even though you only have to use one color of ink on each of them. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of my cards, definitely head over to my Instagram account, which is linked down in the description box below. Like I mentioned, I'm posting more over there these days as I've had a little bit less energy for videos. Any cards I make that don't get videos go over on Instagram. So also check down in that description box below if you want to see any of the supplies I used on these cards today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!